And we have a formal review session with a vote at the end. And just to remind everybody that this is being live streamed. And the way we have our session set up is that we will have a staff presentation, which is 15 minutes in length. And then that will be followed by the applicant or proponent team's presentation of 20 minutes. In the case of both, for the 15 minutes or the 14-minute mark, I'll butt in and say you've got a minute left, and similarly for the 20-minute presentation at the 19-minute mark. And then we'll have questions of clarification from panel members to the proponent team and or the city team. And then we will have discussion after that. And I just wanted to remind everybody that this session is being live streamed on YouTube and is also being recorded. The recording will also be available on the City Planning YouTube channel following the meeting. So before we get into the presentation itself or the project itself, what I need to do is have a roll call. So panel members, I'll call your name. If you can just let me know that you're here and whether or not you have any conflict of interest. And we're going to start with Meg. Meg, are you here? Are you muted? Maybe she's not here. Okay. Dima.
Here, no conflict.
Thanks, Dima. Jessica.
Here, no conflict.
Thank you, Jessica. Juhi? Is Juhi with us? No?
I don't see her.
Okay, great. Heather?
Here and no conflict.
Thank you, Heather. Michael?
Present, no conflict.
Thanks, Michael. Jim Melvin?
Present, no conflict.
Thank you. Jim Goff?
I'm here, no conflict.
Thank you, Jim. Joe?
Hi, I just wanted to acknowledge that I have worked on this portion of the Downsview lands on behalf of Canada Lands some years ago. It's been a long time, so I'm assuming that I do not have a conflict, but if staff may think otherwise, they could just send me an email and I'll sit this one out.
Okay, I'll just very quickly ask Christina.
I think it's fine.
It's fine. Okay, so Joe, you're here and you have no conflict. Ralph?
Present, no conflict.
Thanks, Ralph. Olivia?
Here and no conflict.
Thanks, Olivia. And Paul?
Here and no conflict.
Thank you, Paul. Any other panel members out there that I haven't mentioned who are here? Okay, seeing none, we're going to get started. So we'll start with the city staff presentation. If you could introduce yourselves, and as soon as you have your presentation up on the screen, which I do start to see it. Okay, I am seeing it. You may start, and again, 15 minutes, 14-minute mark, I will tell you that you have a minute left. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. Good afternoon, and thank you for allowing us to present the Downsview West District. I am PC Wasserman, the City Staff Urban Designer working on all things Downsview. Perry Corianis, Secondary Plan, Senior Community Planner in North York, and I will be giving an overview of this application to you today. So the Downsview West District is owned by Downsview Park Incorporated and managed by Canada Lands Company Limited, or Canada Lands. Downsview West District is located in the North York District of Toronto and within the new Downsview Secondary Plan area in the old Downsview Airport lands. Downsview West is the second of 15 districts within the newly updated Downsview Secondary Plan area planned for redevelopment. The site is bound by Shepherd Avenue, Carl Hall Road, and the Barry Go Rail Corridor. Downsview West's 30.3 hectares, or 75 acres, are known for their connection to the broader area's rich aviation and military history. To consider the impacts of development on the surrounding context comprehensively, the district plan also includes updates to Carl Hall Road. The surrounding context to the district includes the following notable buildings and areas. Number 1, the Duke Heights employment area. Number 2, the Arbo District, Woodlot and Bridge connection over Shepherd Avenue. The future, for number 3, the future Downsview East District. Number 4, the Centennial College Center for Aerospace Innovation. Number 5, the Hangar Sports Center Complex. Number 6, the Scotiabank Pond Arena. Number 7, Downsview Park. Number 8 is the Park Commons at Downsview Park. And number 9 is the Stanley Green neighborhood. This district includes some interesting internal and adjacent context consisting of the following. As you can see, number 1 is the Downsview GO and TTC transit station. Number 2 is the supply depot building. And number 3 is 35 Coal Hall Road. Number 4 is the fire hall. And number 5 is the steam plant. The Downsview West is subject to the deliverables of the secondary plan process adopted by City Council on May 22nd, 2024. The district has been developed in parallel to an extent with a secondary plan and ties with a larger vision of the area. So at this point, Perry will go over the timeline. Oh, sorry. I apologize. Sorry, that's it. Well, Perry will go over a brief timeline for us at this point. Sorry. So I'm going to hand this over to Perry.
Thanks, BC. So this slide shows a general timeline of the Downsview West District Plan process until this point in time. This development application was submitted after the Downsview Secondary Plan was adopted by City Council on May 22nd, 2024. As you can see, we are currently in the first submission review of the Downsview West District application. As you can see in the chart below the secondary plan process, there is also a parallel process of the Downsview Environmental Assessment phases 3 and 4 that is running concurrently to the Downsview West development application. And this will inform aspects such as the design, right-of-way width, alignment, and profile of the northern crossing Dove House Extension Street, which is proposed to be located beneath the existing north-south rail line. Next slide, PC. So this slide shows the approved schedules from the official plan. Some of the elements of the public realm have been fixed at the secondary plan scale, such as the planned major streets, greenways, and major parks. However, there is flexibility so that the public realm can be developed through the district plan framework to allow for equitable access of green spaces according to proposed densities of districts and existing neighborhoods. Downsview West is required to provide a major park within the district. A major park is proposed, and the district also proposed an extensive public realm network consisting of both hard and soft spaces in the form of squares, plazas, neighborhood parks, and POPs. These are connected via streets, dedicated cycling routes, mid-block connections, and greenways. As you can see, the land uses in the Downsview West District consist exclusively of mixed-use areas and parks. Next slide, PC. The Downsview West is more recently associated with the area's rich aviation and military history, dating back to 1929, when it was developed by de Havilland Aircraft of Canada. In 1947, building on de Havilland's presence, the Canadian Forces Base opened. Though the base was decommissioned in 1996, the district retains signs of this legacy. The supply depot, building image number 151 on the map, is the largest single structure on the site, covering an area of 27.5 acres. Its innovative design is a technical achievement using concrete to create a fortress-like structure with the ability to survive a nuclear blast, a response to the Cold War era when the complex was built. The fire hall, number 103, is a significant example of modern post-war construction at Downsview that was a variation of a standard template developed for fire stations at other military bases across Canada. Both the supply depot and fire hall are currently listed on the city's Heritage Register. However, they cannot be designated under the Ontario Heritage Act given their federal ownership. Next slide, PC. Identified in the new Downsview secondary plan, Northern Street, known as Dove House Extension in the district plan, will connect Shepherd Avenue east and west of the Go-Berry line, passing beneath the rail east of the depot building and crossing through the depot building. To minimize the impact of this intervention, the district assumes a 30-meter right-of-way consistent with the outcome of phases 1 and 2 of the Update Downsview EA. As a result of this infrastructure-related investment, the depot will be split into 2 structures, Depot North and South, both with new public edges. Further details will be determined through the phases 3 and 4 EA process. The program of the 2 buildings will be explored through future detailed design exercises, but this district plan demonstrates how the daylighting of the depot creates animating opportunities. Depot North may introduce more public-facing non-residential uses, while Depot South, including any potential additions, is primarily expected to maintain its employment focus, particularly along the eastern and southern edges. And in this last slide that I'm presenting shows the maximum gross density. The maximum permitted density within the district is 2.8 times the site area. This may seem lower for a district with a GO and TTC transit station. This is primarily because a large portion of this district is taken up by the existing supply depot building. As you can see the population map and the phasing of population, there are 5 districts within phase 1 that have either been approved by council, are under review, or development applications will be submitted in the near future. This map also conceptually informs the community service and facilities to the needs and requirements by the future populations of Downsview. And now I'll hand it back to PC to finish our presentation.
Thank you, Barry. The Downsview secondary plan notes that development will respond to the existing and planned context, which includes existing transit stations, and plan for a stronger relationship between built form and the public realm. So as you can see, tall buildings are therefore anticipated towards the north of the district, closer to the Downsview GO and TTC transit stations. Please note the secondary plan policies and urban design guidelines are related to this vision, and the image illustrating the high points around the transit area. So this slide shows a quick overview of the district. As you can see, I'm just going to name a few of them. I don't want to take too much time, but there are anticipated 8,800 homes, including 20% affordable units, the creation of 3,300 plus jobs, 900 meters of off-street pedestrian and cycling paths, 1,400 streets targeting the tree canopy of 25%, targeting a TGS Tier 3 of the version 4 of the City of Toronto, as well as anticipated 17,000 residents, which is with 65% within 500 meters of high order transit, as well as a 800 meter or so ancestor trail connecting cultural program areas, open spaces, and placekeeping opportunities. I'm not going to speak to all of these. I'll leave that to the applicant to kind of explain all of that. I think, yeah, so moving on to the last slide that I have. This application seeks, as mentioned before, a ZBA and draft plan of subdivision or the proposed instruments to implement the Downsview West District Plan. And thank you very much for our presentation. I'll now ask the applicant to please share their presentation with the panel. I will stop sharing.
Great, thank you very much. We'll just give a moment for the proponent team to put their presentation up. And as they're doing that, as soon as it's up and available, you'll have 20 minutes, 19-minute mark, I'll let you know that you have a minute left. And if you could please introduce yourselves as you begin the presentation, that would be much appreciated.
Sure, just making sure both of my screens are cooperating here. Let's see.
Well, something is starting to
Something's
appear.
happening?
Well, a tab with your name on it is appearing, indicating that you're starting to share content.
I'm starting to share content. Oh, let's see.
So it's hopeful.
Sorry for the delay here. Oh dear.
Okay, something is appearing.
Something is appearing? Okay.
Yes, just give it a moment. It's got a couple of blank spots, at least on my screen.
In the meantime, I'll introduce myself. Good
Yes.
afternoon, everyone. Thank you for your patience. Technology, always best of friends. My name is Emily Reisman. I'm a partner with Urban Strategies. Happy to give you this presentation on behalf of the design team. I'm also joined online this afternoon by James Miller from Trophic Design. And James, if you want to take a moment to introduce yourself.
Miigwech Emily, Oilena Boju Kinagoya, Tokoga Nene and Dishnakas, Benesi and Odem, Omamo Nene and Shnabe and Kachika Wenging Dunjaba, Minwa Pemdash Yang Magua and Dida. So, hi everyone. My English name is James Miller. I'm Algonquin Anishinaabe, originally from Toronto, Ontario, and I currently live and work near Rice Lake in a town called Cobourg. I am the Indigenous Project Specialist for Trophic Design, so I work as a cultural and design and engagement advisor for our firm. I'm looking forward to the presentation. Thanks for having me.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so
if you can close, it looks like you have a couple of windows open on top of the presentation that we see. Yes, that's better.
Did that work? Do we
Yes.
have it now?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Excellent. Yes, so thank you. So James and I will be giving you the presentation this afternoon. Also on the line, I have my colleague Dennis Lago here from Urban Strategies. He's actually just beside me in the room. Our colleague and client David Anselmi from Canada Lands is on the line, and we're also joined by Andrew Pruss from ERA Architects, should there be any questions that those folks may be better suited to answer. Our team also includes SLA architects from Copenhagen, and we're supported in addition by BA Group and Arup on this file. So this afternoon, I'm going to give you some of the background and context that PC and Perry have already provided. I'll try not to duplicate that too much. We'll give you an overview of the district plan. There is a lot to tell you about, so we've had to pick and choose. Just to give you how we have structured approaching these approximately 75 acres. And then we are going to zoom in, as it were, to a couple special moments and key places in the district plan that we'd like to share with you this afternoon. So again, we're not going to take too much time on the district today. It's being very slow at coming up. I apologize. I am hardwired in to our network. If I could beg your indulgence just to perhaps stop and reload, because now it's frozen on my end.
Okay, that's fine.
Apologies. And I'm going to also do this.
Can you please share your PDF file if you can? Because it may be because of the PowerPoint.
Okay. Yeah, PowerPoint has completely crashed, so I need to bring it back.
Technology is a beautiful thing.
And of course, I did test it before.
That's the beautiful part. Maria,
Yes.
as a backup, do you have a copy of the submission?
Yes.
Okay, a PDF. Okay, we'll see what Emily can do, and if it's taking longer.
But I'm not sure if I can share my this presentation when we are alive.
I see.
But I will try. Sure.
just so we have a backup.
I'm sorry, Chair. I can also perhaps do that if required. If Maria doesn't come right on her side, I also have a copy.
You do have it? Okay, great.
I'll have a look. Let me give Maria an applicant a second, and then I can
that sounds
pull it up.
that sounds great. Thank you, PC.
Sorry, if you can share the presentation, would be great, because I have the other one updated. I'm not sure which one is correct.
Well, whoever has PC, if you're pretty certain that you have the most up-to-date submission. In the meantime, I'm going to ask Emily. Emily, how are you doing?
In addition to PowerPoint crashing, WebEx also crashed on me.
Okay, we're going to try to work out a plan B here. PC, do you have that presentation?
Yes, I'm just quickly finding it in my files, and I will have it up as soon as possible.
I'm also just going to pull up the PDF at the same time. Maybe we'll see whose fingers are fastest.
We'll have a contest. No, the PDF that you've just pulled up, Emily, does that have everything in it that you want to present?
PC, does that? I think you've got everything in there. Is that right?
Yes, that's the one.
Okay.
All right.
That's the consolidated one, I think, Emily, if that's the latest one. So.
Okay. So we're ready to go.
Well,
PC, you're the driver.
Thank you, PC.
Okay.
So we're on the district today. If we could go forward.
So we're going to start your time from the beginning again. Okay. So
thank you. Appreciate it.
Don't worry that you've lost time.
Thank you. We'll try to make it up. I think I still had you here. This was just our brief overview. We'll give you how the thing is generally structured, and then we'll do a zoom in to some of the special places. Next slide, please. And we can go one more as well. As PC and Perry have already given you an overview of the site today, I won't dwell too much here, except to reinforce that, as was previously mentioned, there are several existing assets on or adjacent to the site today. Importantly, the subway GO station, the 18-acre depot building, the fire hall, and just to the south, the steam plant and 35 Car Hall Road. Showing us that the site, as vacant as it might appear, is not a clean slate. And in fact, these assets, as well as the Arbo woodlot just to the bottom of the image on the left side of the screen, and Downsview Park to the right of that image, are important elements to consider and have all shaped and influenced the district plan. So let's go to the next slide and take a closer look at that depot building that so influences the site today. It's over 875,000 square feet, and as we've noted on the slide, there indeed is a commanding presence in the district and in the Downsview area more generally, and helps to showcase a fascinating aspect of Canadian military history. And it's entering its, I guess, third life. Canada Lands has been tenanting it with a variety of uses since DND declared it surplus, including market uses, a film studio, and several others. And as part of this district plan, we're looking at how to incorporate it into the broader community to support that live work goals of the Downsview West District. Next slide, please. We're also thinking about how the relationship to Downsview Park, over 290 acres of it, and the Park Commons immediately adjacent to the district, influence the distribution of parks and open space. And in fact, Downsview West District is the only one of the new Downsview area secondary plan districts to immediately abut the expanse of Downsview Park. And so we can consider that in shaping the area's open space and recreation needs. Next slide. And so with that basic contextual overview, we introduce to you the district plan for Downsview West District. James.
Thank you much, Emily. And so we propose utilizing Mi'kmaq principle of Etowuptimunk, or two-eyed seeing. In layman's terms, this speaks to interweaving Western contemporary knowledge with Indigenous traditional ecological knowledge. So to that end, we propose rebalancing the site through a four-directional understanding. In the Anishinaabe Four Directions worldview, everything comes from land, language, culture, and spirit. Their teachings also speak to four levels of being: spirit, heart, mind, and body. In viewing Downsview West and its existing conditions, we can see that the heavily industrialized aspects of this site can result in it being weighted heavily towards the mind. To rebalance the site, we propose a multifaceted approach present in our district plan. Ecological restoration, which animates spirit and provides hope. Community spaces, which restore the heart of the space and community and provide a sense of belonging. By recognizing and preserving the existing industrial buildings as innovative centers, we balance the mind and provide meaning to the community. Drawing all of these elements together, we move forward with purpose, envisioning a promising future for the district. Next slide, please.
And so it's with that approach of blending worldviews and two-eyed seeing in mind that we have looked at several key structuring moves to help organize the approach to the district. So moving from left to right, as mentioned, the existing assets of the GO station, the depot building, the woodlot and Downsview Park are recognized as opportunities on which to build and grow a district. Oops, did we go one too far, PC? Is it possible to go back one?
Emily, to be honest, I'm not driving this. Somebody else is actually driving it.
Oh.
Maria? Is it possible to go back one? Oh. Okay, I may have made some changes in my own version after sending it. So that's all right. Very sorry to everybody for the confusion. Okay, we'll go forward.
That's okay.
Work with what we have. Next one, Maria, thank you. There we go, that's it. So as mentioned on the left, responding to the existing assets. Cool. In short, maybe it seems to be moving a little bit on its own there. There we go. That's the, maybe one before that is the one we want. But nevertheless, the idea of these diagrams is to describe that we're building on the existing assets, recognizing that the EA process has established a major east-west link through the middle of the site that we can actually use as an opportunity to improve interaction with that depot building. Then we could create key north-south connections because it's a very long and narrow district, almost 900 meters from top to bottom, helping to connect the TTC station at the north end and Downsview Park at the south end. And where those two things intersect together with the depot creates a natural place of connection and community, a place where we can focus the heart of activity in this district. And we layer on top of that a set of fine-grained open spaces and connect all of those things together with a mosaic of a mix of uses, creating unique mixed use areas and defined neighborhoods. Next slide, please. And PC and Perry have already shared with you this slide that provides the overview for the district. And so I wanted just to reinforce that what you see represents the intended densities from the secondary plan, home for over 17,000 people, and highlighting CLC's commitment to 20% affordable housing. We're also excited to demonstrate that this district supports a targeted tree canopy of 25%, and as mentioned, targeting tier 3 of TGS at this early stage of district planning, with obviously further details to come as actual development comes forward. Go to the next. With that overview, we'll start to look at the distribution of the open space network. Because at the district planning scale, we're still working at a fairly high level. This is not a plan where you're going to see detailed architecture or even landscape design. In fact, this district plan is perhaps more typical of the scale of many City of Toronto secondary plans at approximately 75 acres. So it's really the public realm of streets and open spaces that becomes the focus for organizing future development. And it's been intentionally designed to respond to several important considerations. As mentioned, the park to the south and the woodlot to the west are critical features. There's a desire to use the open space network for connectivity for all living things. And in some cases, those connections may be obvious and direct. But for our non-human neighbors and friends, plants and animals, even small clusters of natural spaces provide links between larger spaces and can support habitat health and biodiversity. There are 2 localized stormwater catchment areas within the Downsview West District. You can see that in the second from the left, the darker blue and lighter blue. And the broader commitment to decentralized stormwater management across the Downsview lands means we need to be mindful of how open spaces are located in relation to these catchment areas. We're also mindful of locating open spaces related to where density is located in the plan and to achieve synergies with other elements like the TTC GO station, the depot building, and recognizing the role that Downsview Park to the south can play in the life of the district and how to connect, finally, all of these spaces in a well-integrated network. Next slide, please. And that results in the focused open space network that you see on the plan in front of you. In support of the secondary plan commitment to 100 new acres of parks and publicly accessible parks and open spaces, the district plan delivers over 9 acres of that, or about 3.8 hectares, including, as noted, the 1 acre Hart Park, noted as number 4 in the center of the plan. Also the Courtyard Commons, a publicly accessible easement through the mid-blocks noted at number 6, and what we've deemed the bio corridor on the right side of the plan at number 3. And we will touch on each of these in turn in our special moments section of the presentation. These are supplemented by other parks and POPs, including the generously sized Depot Corner and Carl Hall Square, both associated with the depot building. Each space has been thoughtfully considered on its own and as part of the broader network to support green infrastructure, recreation and accessibility needs, access to city nature, and Indigenous approaches to place. Next slide, please. In terms of getting around through the mobility network, it's also a key part of the broader public realm strategy. The Courtyard Commons I mentioned and the bio corridor are key off-street routes on the west and east sides respectively that supplement a lighter touch to the introduction of new public streets. The major north-south boulevard includes a gentle curve to the south of the east-west northern crossing, pulling away from the depot to further support the adaptive reuse of that building and to play against its long rectilinear facade. It supports the delivery of instead the finer grain Depot Muse Street and creates a special frontage for that building. Additional small local streets provide local connectivity and also support necessary TTC surface bus movements related to the station in the north. All streets will have cycling infrastructure and contribute to the green infrastructure network at Downsview West. Next, please. This network of open space and public realm, including streets and blocks, sets up a framework for distributing the density attributed to this district. The district plan mapping strategy supports a varied skyline with a focus for height at the north end near the station, transitioning down towards the depot and also towards the park. Taller buildings within that are clustered to ensure variation is discernible at the scale of both the district and of the secondary plan. Heights south of our major park, Hart Park, right in the middle of the plan, are also managed to mitigate shadow impacts on that open space. And furthermore, heights along the Muse have been limited to approximately 6 to 8 stories to maintain the intimacy of that street and to support a comfortable microclimate. Microclimate in general has been also a driving factor towards the massing and height strategy within Downsview West District. Next, please. And all of that establishes the basis for the creation of 3 unique neighborhoods. And I'll describe each of them in turn and how each interacts with the depot building. Next, please. The station corridor at the north end is the northern gateway to Downsview West. The space around the station has been expanded in anticipation of large numbers of people who will use transit to access events in Downsview Park and to visit the Downsview lands in general. We've created a deliberate mid-block connection in what we've called Lot D, just north of the depot building, to offer views and pedestrian connections directly to the northern end of the depot building. In the densest part of Downsview West District, which is this station quarter, that we might find the tallest buildings with a mix of residential and commercial spaces, supplemented and supported by ample open space with the northern park, the station square, and the northern end of the bio corridor. Next. At the center of the plan is what we've deemed the heart of at the crossroads. And that's where the community comes together with major community assets like the 1 hectare Hart Park, anticipated future market uses in the North Depot building, and significant open space associated with Depot Corner at the edge of the South Depot building, in addition to residential buildings with active uses at grade, supporting the life of the community. Next. At the south end of the area is a neighborhood we've called the Mews after a special street called Depot Mews. The primarily residential neighborhood that interfaces with the depot along that special street and also features our special feature called the Courtyard Commons that we'll talk more about shortly. It's a primarily mid-rise neighborhood, and the open space network also includes the Fire Hall Park, wrapped around the former fire hall as was previously described, particularly the fire halls that supported CFB Downsview, and opportunity for new commercial or institutional uses aligning Carl Hall Road, building on the other elements like the successful Centennial College further to the east. Next, please. So at this time, we'll take a moment to zoom in on some of those features that we've been describing so far, starting with Hart Park. James.
Thanks, Emily. Next slide, please. At the center of the district is Ode Okogeduanan, meaning the gathering place of the heart, providing a balance of recreational amenities, community gathering spaces, and planted areas. We propose this park will foster a sense of belonging for human and non-human beings alike. Green infrastructure will be embedded throughout the park design strategies using bioswales, gentle typography, and below-grade engineering. In addition, we propose this multifaceted park contain culturally appropriate Indigenous placekeeping initiatives, recreational and community gathering spaces, and support for naturalized bioswales to manage stormwater. Back to you, Emily.
We go to the next slide. We have another image of Hart Park.
And so in this slide here, you can see some of the proposed placekeeping initiatives. So there's a sacred fire site towards the kind of north side of the park there. We can see some recreational facilities along the kind of eastern side of the picture there. And then right in the center there, there's a community gathering space with some public art, an Indigenous mural in this particular rendering.
We haven't fully, oh, sorry, go ahead, James.
Oh, and I was just going to speak to the building facades, which are tentatively proposed to be inspired by different aspects of Indigenous weavings and other architectural cues.
Obviously, this will be a major City of Toronto park, so we know that the design will evolve, but this demonstrates the concept of how in this major park we can accommodate a range of identified and desirable features, recreation, cultural gathering, and the blue-green infrastructure and natural areas that are part of the city nature and stormwater concept. Next slide, please. As you've heard, the EA process associated with the secondary plan identified a street connecting both sides of the Downsview area, and it will go through the depot building. And the depot building itself was constructed in several modules, which actually makes this possible. So the building can be opened up at those expansion joints, and the remaining space on either side of the required right-of-way can be used for public realm. If we go to the next slide, please. This allows us to think about how to bring the public into a building that has been potentially a mystery for so long. You drive past and you just see the extent of the facade. Some folks may have had the ability to visit the current market in the North End, or been with us on some of the tours that have been given over a number of years. But as the building evolves into its next phase of life, we imagine the western side of the depot can be transformed to have some of those more public-facing uses, commercial activities, retail, etc., while still allowing the majority of the east side to be retained for other types of commercial employment, light industrial activities, truly supporting the idea of this as a live, work, and play district. Next slide.
Emily, you have 1 minute left, but I realize it's been an unusual situation from a technology point of view. How much more time do you need?
We have 3 other places I think that we'd like to take you to.
Okay.
We'll try to keep it as brief as we can.
Okay, let's move on then.
At your indulgence, thank you.
Thank you.
So it provides an illustration of how we can use the space created on either side of the right-of-way to help mitigate the effects of the underpass and provide that connection with the building along its various facades. I think of these as urban porches that might wrap around the building, much the way that the porch wraps around St. Lawrence Market in downtown Toronto as Market Street passes to the south. Next, please. Towards the south end of the plan, as you've heard, the Depot Muse is proposed as an intimate 14.5-meter wide one-way southbound street that will help support an intimate kind of character animating the western frontage of the Muse. As you can see in this illustration, we have an opportunity to open up the western facade of the building and expose the internal rail system that was used to move goods around this massive storage building as a way to expand the public realm and connect people then up to the remainder of the finished floor level of the depot building itself. Create one of those special places unique to Downsview West District and the Downsview area at large. Next slide, please. The Courtyard Commons is inspired by Toronto's rear lanes, places where neighbors meet and kids ride their bikes, and it's a place to get around off of the main streets. And in our version of it, unlike Toronto's lanes, there is no vehicular traffic that would be invited here. Instead, this would be a publicly accessible pedestrian easement in the middle of the block, west of Depot Boulevard. On either side would be the private courtyards associated with development, and it creates that sort of an intimate space, green space, opportunity for neighbors and friends to gather and provide an off-street connection between the northern street and Downsview Park to the south. James?
Thank you, Emily. And so this courtyard network also speaks to the aspect of belonging, creating another avenue of a path to the heart in the district. It can also be seen as a way to connect human beings to nature, further rebalancing the spirit of the site, as well as ecologically providing a connection for pollinators and birds throughout the district, thereby supporting and the rejuvenation of the spirit throughout the district.
Next, please. Along those same lines, on the east side of the district is what we've deemed the bio corridor and bridge. And this was inspired by the resilience of nature and all of the grasses and natural areas that, with no help from us, are growing along that rail corridor today. And so we said, why not support and allow for that natural experience to thrive and give it the space that it deserves. So this is proposed as a roughly 15-meter corridor that expands and contracts as needed to support the activities in the depot that allows for both nature and pedestrian and active transportation movements along almost the full length of the district. And it will be connected to the north and the south with a proposed bridge over that underpass to allow a nearly 1 kilometer direct off-street route from the TTC station to Downsview Park. James?
Thanks, Emily. And from an Indigenous perspective, we can see this through the metaphor of the sweetgrass braid. So there are three strands of transportation present in this biocorridor. The first one being the existing train, the second one being the human bike and walking paths, and the third being the green infrastructure, which is present for our non-human relatives. As such, the green infrastructure mirrors the courtyard network and is an opportunity to further connection and belonging in the neighborhood. As I mentioned, both ecologically for pollinators and birds, and in a human sense, providing opportunities again to connect with green space and naturalized areas as people navigate down the eastern area of the district.
And I think, James, you can take the last slide as well.
Thank you, Emily. And so the centerpiece of the district is a trail that we propose to call the Ancestors Trail. It takes cues from two prominent wampum belts. You can see the first wampum belt in the upper left-hand corner of the image, which is the Seven Fires Prophecy Belt. This belt is placed on the southern end of the trail. So if we look at the right-hand side on the map, that's the district muse, or the depot muse rather, on the southern end. And then the second wampum belt is kind of stretched out across the north in the space of 5 diamonds, and that's the Yellowhead Belt. So in the southern section of the trail, the Depot Muse takes inspiration from Trafalgar Square and its 4th Plinth Public Art Initiative. Each of the 8 diamonds, which are located in 7 sections along the trail, are public art and multi-use spaces. Much like the Seven Fires Prophecy speaks to reconciliation, this section of the trail is envisioned as a space to provide art, culture, and spontaneous gatherings, bringing together a diverse community in the district. The northern section of the Ancestors Trail similarly has cultural waypoints across the 5 diamonds. The Yellowhead Belt, from which this section of the trail is inspired by, speaks to treaty relationships between Anishinaabeg, Haudenosaunee people, and the Crown. As such, we feel that the Ancestors Trail provides a central network and a central spine of reconciliation, understanding, culture, and public art that speaks to a unique opportunity as an Indigenous-centered piece of infrastructure for this particular district. Emily?
Thank you all for your tolerance of our technological challenges this afternoon. That's our overview of the Downsview West District Plan for you, and we're certainly happy to take any questions.
Great, thank you very much. And thanks for everybody's patience, including the presentation team. We're going to move on to clarification questions. These are questions that can come from panel members to the proponent team and or the city. You can raise your virtual hands. I'm going to give us a total of 15 minutes, so bear with me here for just a second. 3:48, okay. So we may not get through all the questions. I've got Jim, Melvin, Joe, Paul, Heather, and Jessica. I will start with Jim.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Emily, that great presentation, but I would like to ask, what are the thoughts of the group for how it engages, the design engages Shepherd Avenue West? Are those buildings that are along the Shepherd Avenue frontage, are they integrated with use, or do they turn their back on Shepherd?
Good question, Jim. That's, Shepherd is a major route, and certainly it's not our intention to turn back to Shepherd at all. But there's also a recognition that it is not the most friendly of streets, and despite all of our best attempts to create development on either side of it, with also the CLC Arbo district on the west, it will still be a more challenging environment. So the intention is for those buildings to come and meet Shepherd at the street and to be double-sided effectively, both having a presence internal to the district, but also with activity and entrances on the Shepherd side as well. So they can contribute to the softening of the street to the extent possible.
So
there's also grade in certain places that they can help to mitigate.
So this project would affect the streetscape of Shepherd?
Yeah, it should help to improve it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jim. Moving on to Joe.
Hi, my question is, I guess, wanting to dig a bit deeper in the fact that the TTC and Go Stop is the principal gateway to Downsview Park, especially for major public events. And therefore, from time to time, very large volumes of people will be moving north and south through this district. And potentially, if the depot becomes a very successful project, that also becomes a magnet in and of itself. So while from time to time, there are a lot of visitors coming to this place, you're also trying to make it a neighborhood. And I'm asking the team to just elaborate a little more. And, you know, for example, that pathway, Courtyard Commons, I think you called it, running in behind, implying a kind of publicness to almost all the optional paths that are there. So in the reality of a neighborhood that also just wants to be a neighborhood and, you know, live normally, have a bit of privacy, how do you reconcile the large, you know, numbers of people moving with the way development might happen? I'm just kind of a little puzzled by that. Are people living in a kind of a fishbowl here? How do you normalize the neighborhood is what I'm asking.
I mean, it's a really good question. It's certainly something that we have thought about, in part by creating effectively crush space around the station, but then also multiple north-south routes. So with the connection along the rail corridor, the bio corridor, with the Depot Muse and with the main Depot Boulevard Street, those would be your main north-south direct routes to get to activities in the park. The hope is that the Courtyard Commons is that slightly more serene place, but it is intended to be public. I don't know that there is a way to say it's public sometimes, but not all the time. But that would be where the so-called normalcy could arise for folks in the neighborhood when there are big events, and the majority of folks will be using the main, more apparently public routes. But that has been part of our consideration. So thank you for the question.
Okay, move on then. Thank you both. On to Paul.
Hi. Yeah, I'm just wondering, Emily or James, if could one of you walk us through a little bit? I'm looking to understand the scale of the streets, for example, something about the right-of-way setbacks, how the building heights, like what the sort of configuration of the streets is. We've heard a lot about the public spaces, but curious, especially the primary north-south street. I forget what it was called.
Depot Boulevard. Sure, Paul. The
Thank
Depot
you.
Boulevard is as a 25-meter right-of-way. And the major east-west street, that final determination will become through the EA process, but it'll be in the order of 30 meters. Depot Muse is proposed, as I mentioned, as a more intimate street at 14.5. And some of the other local streets in the northern end, I think one we've deemed Market Way, and the other similarly Downsview Lane at about 18.5 meters. So we're trying to apply a right sizing approach to include both the space necessary to support TTC transit infrastructure, green infrastructure, and travel lanes while not oversizing the infrastructure at the same time.
And sorry if I may, just on the main north-south one, is it one lane in each direction too? There's sort of hints of a boulevard of trees, or if you could just walk through a bit of that.
Proposed at 2 lanes in each direction within that, or rather 1 lane and a turning lane. Apologies, I've got my notes in front of me. In that 25 meters, it's 1 lane and turning lanes where necessary. Then there's room for the cycling infrastructure, pedestrian infrastructure, and the green boulevard for trees and green infrastructure.
Okay, does that answer your question, Paul? Yes. Okay, on to Heather.
Thank you. 2 quick questions. One, lot 1, which in your sculpting the massing diagram is a kind of purple-ish building south of the Depot South. Just wondering if it looks like a non-residential use. I'm just wondering what it is.
That's what we're imagining at this point, is something potentially institutional related. Centennial College is just to the east along Carl Hall Road. Maybe this is a building that supports the kind of activities that are going on in there. There's no specifics as of yet, but we're imagining it as maybe it's a mix. There might be some institutional in it and potentially res on top, but that's all still to be worked out.
Okay, great. And then a quick second question. I'm just not quite understanding the bio corridor and how it navigates the bridge and the train at that intersection.
So the bio corridor will run, think of it like the West Toronto rail path or the something like that. Will run along the rail corridor at grade. When the underpass passes under the rail, we're proposing to build a bridge to connect the north and south portions of that path. So as the train goes over a new bridge, so too will this active transportation route. We'll have a new bridge connection as well.
So it'll be 2 bridges. One will be green and one will be for the train?
Effectively, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, great. Okay.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Next is Jessica.
Just a quick sort of technical question. How are the employment uses on the east side of the depot serviced? Like, where do vehicles come in? I think the bio corridor section might have explained it to me, but if you could just explain how that's serviced.
Sure. You're right. On the east side of the depot building, that's where we're anticipating some of those light industrial commercial uses might continue to occur. There's film studios, for example, in there now. And working with BA, we've determined that the trucks that might be necessary to service that can still come in from Carl Hall Road on the south for the South Depot and through, I think, Depot Market Way, and one of the local streets on the north end to come right into the east side and still provide access to the loading docks along there. The bio corridor, there's enough space between the face of the depot building and the rail corridor to allow for those movements and the bio corridor to exist. Where possible, the bio corridor can expand to approximately 15 meters. There might be places where it might need to narrow to 8 to allow for some of those movements to happen safely. But we have determined that it can be, expanding and contracting along its length to accommodate all of those functions.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Michael.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Maybe 3 quick questions. Is it fair to understand that the retail is concentrated largely in the depot building and less so in the base of new buildings?
I think that there will be retail both in the depot building and in the base of new buildings, but definitely not every new building is proposed to have retail. We're anticipating cluster in the north end close to the station, and there's a building immediately north of the depot where we're anticipating some grade related retail. And to the south of the east-west street, some of the buildings approximate or across from Hart Park, and then along the depot muse is where we're focusing the retail commercial activity.
Okay, and I'll just amplify that by saying, so then the main streetness of Depot Boulevard will not necessarily be made with retail.
Correct. It'd be more of a residential character along that street.
Second question, is it too early to talk about the impact on open space and landscape of stormwater management? Is it considered now or not yet?
Absolutely considered now. As part of the whole decentralized stormwater management approach, that is one of the hallmarks of the Downsview secondary plan, we've had to think about that in the location and sizing of the open spaces as you see them.
Lastly, any consideration of district power considering the mutual benefit of different uses?
I think that the team has been broadly looking into opportunities for district energy, but I don't know any specifics at this point.
Thank you.
Great. And I'm just going to ask a quick question, and then I think Ralph is the end of the question line. Are you anticipating any sort of weather protected connection between Depot South and Depot North for pedestrians, for people?
At this time, no, there would be a level at grade public intersection crossing as the way to reach from one side of the building to the other.
Okay, thank you. Ralph, you have the last question.
With regards to just the open space network, number 5, number 8, which are Courtyard Commons and Carl Hall Square, are those meant to be publicly owned and maintained as well?
Carl Hall Square would be a POPs space. The Courtyard Commons, I think we're exploring as an easement, POPs easement kind of approach to ensure it's publicness, but not necessarily public ownership. But that's part of a discussion. It needs to allow for parking below grade, for example, for the adjacent development parcels.
And of course, the Courtyard Commons is all privately owned, but publicly accessible, right?
Yes.
Okay, does that answer your questions, Ralph?
Yep.
Yep, okay. Thank you, everybody, for the questions. We've taken a little bit more time, but these are good questions, and it's really valuable to get the answers to them. We're going to move into panel discussion, and panel members, I'll just very quickly remind you of the following key issues that staff have asked us. Please comment on the proposed public realm strategy for the district, particularly A, Courtyard Commons and Bio Corridor, their role, function, conceptual design considerations, and B, Depot Muse, its role as an active and pedestrian-oriented frontage and design move to support the space. Second one, please comment on strategies regarding the supply depot, particularly A, how can the two sections of the supply depot still connect visually or otherwise while the new Northern Street connection bisects it? And B, how should the adjacent built form respond to the supply depot building? And finally, please comment on the overall approach to height and massing distribution of the district. So if you keep those in mind, the order of comment is the following. Olivia, Jim Goff, and Dima, Jim, Melvin, Jessica, and Heather, Ralph, Joe, Paul, and Michael. I'm going to suggest that each person self-manage their time, 3 minutes each, and if there is any time left over at the end, we'll circle back around. So Olivia, if you could start the comments, that'd be great.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your presentation. There's so much to digest. I'm still kind of digesting all the information here, but this is such an important site, and it's really exciting to see this. There's a lot to appreciate here. I think generally the sort of mix of building typologies and massing, I think I really appreciate, and I think that they make sense. I appreciate the commitment to affordable housing and would encourage you to push that as far as possible. And then of course your commitment to sustainability and achieving TGS tier 3. I thought I saw a little steam plant on the south side of the site. So hopefully that's sort of your way of considering the possibility of district energy. Definitely that's a real opportunity here. I think my comments are largely around the depot, and I think I really enjoyed hearing the history of this building, and I think the sort of original form of this building as a fortress, and you can really see this impenetrable form regenerating this building and giving it new life and introducing a level of porosity to it. I think is such a compelling story, and I think there's an opportunity to perhaps push that even farther. I think the moment of daylighting the building is so compelling, and I think pushing that as far as possible is important because it's a little bit unfortunate. It feels like that moment is really given over to vehicles, and I know that there's some activity introduced on the north and south side. I think I would look for a little bit more sort of generosity and activity happening around the building, and I wonder if that could be achieved through some form of interstitial spaces that are maybe not inside or outside. I noticed there's sort of the addition of the commercial activity on the west side, and that still seems like a very hard line, and I wonder if there could be more sort of cuts and interaction between the space where the ancestor trail is on the west side, and maybe that sort of weaves in and out of the building. I think the scale of it very much feels like circulation right now, and I wonder if there could be more generosity of space and activity happening there. When I see those images of the market, I really want that to start to spill outside, and perhaps there's a moment at the Hart Park where that could happen, but I also feel like that's divided by the roadway again. So I think just rebalancing the circulation of vehicles and where larger activities and gatherings could happen around the depot building could take another sort of deeper look. And then finally, I think building a bit on Joe's comment about this being a neighborhood where normal people will live. The depot is very much an exciting destination where hopefully people from all over the city will come. And I notice you have promised a school and 2 daycares. Understanding that it's still early, I am sort of looking for those places in the plans because those are the sort of places that anchor a community. And I think they also will feed and inform the beautiful network of outdoor spaces that you've created. And really, I would see them as a part of that public network. So I think just creating those anchor points on the community scale will also help out. And those are my comments. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Moving on to Jim Goff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the presentation. Given the high-level nature of the presentation and the specific issues you've asked about, I think my comments will be very brief. I think, as someone mentioned, I think the public realm strategy needs to reflect the fact that there will be occasions when there will be masses of people swarming through here. So, you know, things like the bio corridor need to be carefully designed so they don't just end up being completely trampled by people drunkenly leaving a Rolling Stones concert or something like that. And the Depot Muse, I mean, the image you've shown seems to indicate the kind of space it's going to be. And I don't think at this point I can identify any specific design moves to support that space. It's not my field of expertise. And then the second question was about strategies regarding the supply depot, particularly how can the 2 sections of the supply depot still connect visually or otherwise? I think inevitably they're going to. It'll be obvious they're 2 halves of the same building. That's just my naive transportation take on things, and I'm not sure they need to be connected beyond what you've shown. You've shown a pedestrian connection along the railway corridor. I think that's the main means of connecting the 2 in terms of accessibility, as well as the intersection that's going to happen to the west. So I think you've got the bones of the structure anyway. And third question about height and massing is, again, not my field of expertise. So thank you, good luck in the future, and look forward to seeing more detailed presentations sometime later on.
Great, thank you, Jim. Moving on to Dima.
Thank you very much for your presentation. It was incredibly interesting. Just trying to focus on some of the questions being asked and maybe touching first on that depot connection between north and south. I agree. I don't think there needs to be like an architectural connection between the 2 buildings. It might just simply the continuity of materiality between one and the other and the public realm to connect them, street furniture that speaks to each other, kind of a localized vocabulary of materials, colors, furniture, signage that kind of unifies it so it becomes like an exterior square of those buildings to connect them, I think would work potentially. One of the questions I was wondering was about the bridge, the bio bridge. It seems to, I think it would benefit from going all the way up to Shepherd. So that like it seems to start at the TTC and continue south and ends, you know, sort of abruptly on Carl Road. There's an opportunity there to connect it to Shepherd, to have it really be more continuous. And then when it gets to Carl Road, and I think this is outside the project purview, but maybe part of a larger discussion, is that the connection east-west along Carl Road should also be considered, of how people coming down, how that connects and how that links, and maybe that bio bridge or that language has an opportunity of extending east and west to connect to the park and also connect to Centennial College. It was difficult for me to understand like the height strategy of the proposal beyond the sketch. So I would hope, I'm assuming that will continue to be developed. I think as Olivia said, it seems to be a lot of residential buildings and massing, and there's a discussion of where the schools are, but where these schools are, where the daycares are, I think will have a significant impact on the neighborhood and its use, as well as on the muses, like sort of the back end of the laneway that's being recreated in the back. The images are very seductive, but it's how does the bylaw get written to ensure they get executed and that they actually work, and it doesn't turn into sort of a random space, like as each development gets further designed, there has to be actually continuity of language that makes sense to sort of unify that space, and how does that actually get executed, I think would be my main concern and my main question. And as for the depot building, it's like really thrilling to see a building being, it's being substantially altered, but in a sense it's actually being also conserved, which I think is an achievement for the project. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Dima. Moving on then to Jim Melvin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Emily, thank you for your team's presentation. This is one of the most thoughtful presentation I've seen on this panel. It is easy to follow. It has its bases in nature and how nature would influence your design, how you use social characters to build neighborhoods, how you use dark. It's a wonderful project. I think you guys have done a great job here. There are sufficient, I believe, distinctions between the neighborhoods, and that's all driven by, I think, your park and open space system and well connected with your Aboriginal ideas. I think we can all agree that the depot building is not the most attractive building in the world. So I totally agree with breaking this building, taking a section away and making its massive size, reducing its massive size. Next, I think that you have placed the building correctly, or you've modified your road system with what's it called? Depot Boulevard. You have the depot directly, the North Depot directly on the boulevard. Then you hide the depot behind some development, the South Depot behind some south development at the south side, which I think helps reduce the scale of the building. And where you do introduce the building to the street, you seem to do it in a nature that is welcoming, according to your drawings. And I see in the graphic of the master plan that there seems to be a bunch of squares running down the middle of that building that kind of, I think, mimic the public and the manufacturing, or not the manufacturing, the retail side of the building. I think that's very, very important that you bring some sunlight into this building and into both sides with a north-south skylight. Wonderful design. I'm very happy with the lane idea of the space between, what do you call it? Not the bioswale. The space between the buildings on the west side. I think at the width that you've drawn it, it will be able to function pretty well as as a little bit of stormwater, a little bit of separation from private and public space. So I think your scale there is correctly. I'm really looking forward to how you detail all of this stuff. The bioswale or the bio corridor, I should, at 15 meters wide, again seems of the right scale to provide walkway and planting space. I just can't tell from the graphics if there will be from the bridge over the North Street, what's it called, Dave House? If there will be access at Dave House down from the bridge down into the building site. I think access there, and I think there should also be access on Dominion Lane. And Dominion Lane, I'm not sure what happens to that space, what Dominion Lane is, but a section through that and how that all relates to the corridor. Dominion Lane could be a pedestrian corridor as well. And then as well as all the gray parts on the east side of the depot building, are they to be future parking? I'm not sure what the between the bioswale and the building. It's just a graphic thing. So I think overall, I like the approach. I like the scale of the developments and the neighborhoods, and I think you've correctly given them each their own character of open space. And my calculation seems to be you're about 2 meters squared of open space per people, the new residents here, which is a lot more than we see elsewhere in Toronto, at least at this time. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Great, thank you, Jim. Next is Jessica and then Heather.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your presentation and all the hard work that's gone into this. It's really such an interesting district with these wonderfully amazing assets to celebrate and work with. I really appreciated how the two-eyed seeing has contributed to the design, and I really love the consideration given to non-humans. It's always wonderful to hear about that and that it's been considered. Looking at the depot corner, I like how the depot corner celebrates that corner and starts to draw people down into the muse. And I think anchoring the two ends of that muse with squares is working really well. The rendering of the activated muse is very excited, sort of giving me coal drop yard vibes, very vibrant. So I think the direction there is really great. When thinking about how the North and South Depot can still sort of feel connected, I believe one of the visualization, a couple of them show sort of is starting to get at that, this idea that elements of the structure can sort of extend into the landscape. I think that's really captivating, sort of talking to a building that was once there and, the remnant columns and beams, even if they're not actual remnants. Just thinking about how you can even push those out further, like could they extend into the right of way or over the right of way? I think that will just give it sort of a greater impact, or parts of it might feel more tangible if they're sort of further out into the public realm. Because I really love the story of the history of the building and its ability to sort of withstand nuclear blasts. And I've seen a lot of construction like that I've visited, and it's always really quite intriguing. For the courtyard commons, I like the idea, probably because I often prefer walking through our laneways instead of down the street. But I think how exactly it'll function will really need to be studied further. That interface between public and private just needs to be tested to really ensure that there's sort of safety for all, but also ensuring that the publicness of the space is apparent. So obviously early days, but encourage you to keep looking at that. The bio corridor is very interesting, both in terms of it as an experience, but it also has kind of a fast track route from the transit hub. It would be great to see a section through the depot to the rail corridor during like an active day when there's vehicles and active in sort of the service route or the parking, I hesitate to say parking area behind that sort of light industrial employment area use. So it'd be really interesting to see that, and then maybe to think about if guidelines can be given around how that service route or parking area is designed to encourage it to have green infrastructure and sustainability in mind. You know, does it for traffic purposes have to be a large paved space? And then just a few final thoughts. I commend the porosity of the blocks. I think they really look to support a various routes through the community. But I do have concerns with how to make that shepherd frontage one that's still comfortable and as pedestrian friendly as possible. And perhaps the solution is not necessarily a sort of a standard approach to that right of way. That's all for me. Thank you very much. I look forward to seeing this develop further.
Great. Thanks, Jessica. Heather.
Yep, thanks very much for the presentation. As others have mentioned, it's a very rich package, and it's filled with lots of personality, much more than we usually see. So thank you very much for that. I also very much appreciate the approach that is, I feel, kind of led by points of distinction and moments of placemaking. And just looking at whether or not we have enough of these. Are they complementary in nature? Are they correctly sized? You know, what is the inspiration for those? So I really like that approach. Also, very much appreciate the unique neighborhoods overlay that Emily spoke about, and the way it sort of naturally starts to divide up the community into areas that are unique. I also, like others, really like the grand scale of the supply depot building. And I'm not sure I've ever been in such a big space. I think that the kind of scalelessness of a building like this is very rare. I compare it to like Dia Beacon. It's over 4 times the size of that space. So I think that's a very unique and rare opportunity. I appreciate the Depot Boulevard and the kind of curving nature, which I assume has happened to give some more breathing room around the depot, the supply depot building, and then also break up the neighborhood into right-sized blocks for predominantly residential use. I do think that the Muse district could use a little bit more, I guess, Muse-like scale. The depot Muse rendering on page 26 was one of the things that I found most exciting about the package. And I really think that that block that's kind of, frankly, doesn't look like it's had the same amount of attention as the others, where lot H1 is, I think really needs to be kind of tightened up to have more of these Muse type spaces and spaces that are not dead ends. Right now, that block looks a bit like the back of house service. And I think that lot H1, if it were to have kind of through retail that maybe complemented that Muse street, that might be a way of kind of bringing that block up to the level of the others. I really like the courtyard commons idea and how it actually kind of is connective tissue that links some of these unique neighborhoods. So I think that's quite successful. And I generally agree with the sculpting and massing shown. I do agree with the way that the height is deployed over the site. We were asked to specifically comment on that. I do think that it's a shame, actually, that the depot building is being broken. I might be in a minority here, but I just wonder, and I'm sure this is way too late in the process to ask this question, but I simply wonder why the east-west connection couldn't be made closer to where those transit stations are currently, and have a bridge that really kind of celebrates something to do with transit rather than breaking up this very, very rare commodity. I also think that the way that the two halves of the building interact across this kind of big dig that happens through the site. I really like the idea of big porches on either side. I think that's you know, a very strong idea, but I feel that they're very far apart, and that the kind of terracing nature and the kind of retaining walls that will be result here are kind of in contrast to this idea of slicing through something. So I feel that maybe a bit more work could happen there to really create a moment of tension. I feel like it's being a little bit too polite if this east-west connection does in fact have to slice through the building. And those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. We're going to move on next to Ralph, then Joe, then Paul, then Michael. Back to you, Ralph.
Good afternoon. It's another tour de force. I have to say, Downsview is really becoming such an exciting, at least vision, for the city, and this just keeps rolling along. I think it's incredibly sophisticated, incredibly rich tapestry of built form and open space, and kudos to the entire team. It is really nice to see a series of spaces. I can imagine walking through, enjoying these spaces at different times of the year, different times of the day. And so I really don't have a lot of things, but some small things I just want to touch upon. I would love to see a schematic or diagrammatic ground floor plan to really start really understanding where some of those uses could touch and activate some of these spaces that you've created. I think that would help a lot. Of course, some of the ground floors to deal with some of the ambitions of your plan, specifically the common space with regards to servicing, which is the bane of our existence when we start developing the designs for buildings. Loading, we can't come off of Shepherd, and all of a sudden the backs become a lot of pressure. And I think if servicing starts overpowering that commons, I think it loses its strength, and that's where I think it deviates from what is the lane, typical lane in Toronto, which has lots of character. But I can't imagine that that image that I think you have would survive with too much of the large scale loading requirements that will be required. The depot Muse is just fantastic. I really am excited about it. I completely agree with Heather about maybe just the representation. And I know it's early on and you're not designing buildings, but I do think that looking at those buildings as buildings that are facing a muse, that actually have active uses at grade, I strongly maybe direct you to start looking at a trend that we've been trying to push the city into, which is what's called, I think, in the industry, light industrial mixed use. To start looking at small scale light industrial uses that can exist at the ground floor. And I think that a lot of that small scale industrial use, small scale food processing, small kind of low impact manufacturing workshops tend to not be wanted as an employment use at the ground floor of mixed use buildings. But I do think here especially would be an incredible opportunity to incubate small scale uses that are not typical retail, I'm going to say, but could actually be much more flex industrial. The Shepherd Avenue, I just think that I spent half my adult parental life at the hockey rink at Scotiabank Pond, so know the street very well. It's incredibly hostile. Of course, we want to slow it down, but I'm just wondering whether it might just require a bit of modulation of the buildings to create a little bit more like the rail corridor equally maybe on Shepherd, and maybe some buildings can come up to the street and some buildings can pull back a little bit so that it doesn't have to be so kind of I'm going to say Regent Street, and maybe something a little bit more kind of crenellated. My one area that I'm kind of a bit scratching my head is Station Quarter. It seems that south of Depot, the plan's unbelievably beautiful, really well balanced, and then it kind of looks like it's just kind of like normal Toronto, north of Northern Park, and you know, the station is not a A+ piece of architecture, and I just worry about the scale of Northern Park and the station activation. You know, if I'm walking north and being able to walk to work on the north side of Shepherd, I just feel that there could be a pinching, that Northern Park could be maybe have an end at an eastern end. Maybe the building comes out, a podium comes out, or something gets placed in the park. And I'm worried that parks will not embrace those things. So I'm hoping that maybe the plan could actually embed that within it. I also think that the north side of Station Square, you know, that's a service road right now that services the square. I would strongly suggest something, whether it's art, significant art maybe, or another piece of program or something to bring that scale down, because you come down, I forget the road, VT Street, I think, and then you just kind of do these funny jogs before you get to the kind of really unbelievable, beautiful tapestry that you've created. So I would say maybe Northern Park could be focused. Maybe it's more trapezoidal, wider at Shepherd, narrower towards the east, so that Station Park gets a bit more enclosure. The last thing is a kind of just a pitch, which is it'd be great to be able to put a guideline in to talk a little bit about architecture. I know that I profess plurality in Toronto, but it would be really nice to maybe just embed something about, and I think Heather, somebody said personality, the personality of the built form, and maybe personality of podiums, or something that maybe embraces two-eyed seeing, this balance of an industrial past and a older and incredibly important First Nations past. And maybe that could create an incredible launching point for a bunch of really lucky architects that are going to work on this master plan. Otherwise, kudos. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Ralph. Moving on to Joe, then Paul and Michael.
Thanks, everyone. And I'm kind of appreciate a lot of the observations that have been made, and the kind of quality and depth of the presentation and the work that led to the presentation. But I have to say that I have some questions, I guess, about how this comes together. I partly mean by that very practically, how will this neighborhood actually get implemented? Appreciating its history in terms of tenure. I'm imagining that there will be a developer or developers, plural, to be determined, or maybe that's known, I don't know, that will in fact be together with design teams, given the kind of the project to execute. And therefore, to me, the question of what guidance will they have as they actually implement what we're talking about here, because this isn't, and partly where I'm going with this is the following. The anchor of this district is the depot. As everybody's described, and without extending it, it's got me thinking about, okay, what are the corollaries or similarities? So, for example, the distillery district, obviously very different in terms of character and in many other ways historically, but the scale of a conversion of an industrial place into a tourist destination that ends up also, in the case of the distillery district, accommodating a lot of residential density. How do you in fact welcome the kind of focus of visitors that a place like the distillery attracts, with actually creating a place that people want to live, that's decent. There's a place to go to school, you know, walk your dog, have some privacy, and not get overwhelmed on special event day. And, you know, you have to leave town because you just can't stand it. And so when I'm looking for the distillation, I see a demonstration plan with lots of, you know, incredibly diverse architecture and, you know, incredible green and all of that. But in the end, what's a team, what's going to be, you know, ultimately guiding where they're going? And where I'm going with this is this balance between the guidance of the public realm, of which I sense there's a lot of guidance and specificity right now at this early stage. And with respect to built form, I'm not seeing evidence of much yet. I see diagrams and a whole bunch of tall buildings over there, but in actual development of that built form, I'm missing. With respect to the kind of structure of it, I know it was presented as sort of 3 neighborhoods. I'm finding a hard time seeing it that way. I absolutely see the distinction that Dove House Way, or the street that goes under the railway, the east-west street. And just as a small point to Heather's comment about the building having to be split in that east-west road, I just happen to know, and there are a number of others, no doubt, on the call that do this. This is like a decade or two of debate and development and consideration about how to get east-west connectivity at Downsview. So it's not been lightly arrived at. But my point is, it therefore really strongly divides a north side, a north end and a south end, with a great public space being proposed at the middle. On the north side, I really like this strategy, by the way, in the plan, where I think it's called Hart Park on the northwest corner, I guess, of that intersection, Depot Corner on the southeast. But Depot Corner then leads to that muse that is sort of the kind of direct sort of north-south connection to Downsview Park below. I think that's a really sweet point in the plan, and it brings what I would call a kind of north side together with the south side. The reason I'm drawing, you know, it's not just a semantic about is it 3 neighborhoods or 2, or how do you define that, because that the way that gets thought about then informs this built form control and the nature of you know, what distinctions there are between places. I think it was Ralph just a moment ago, and I want to agree and reinforce his point. I find I'm highly skeptical of the scale of Station Square and Northern Park. The illustration I think that you have looking west on Tuscan Gate Extension concerns me in terms of the gap between buildings on the north side of that park and buildings on the south side. It spaces that large, instead of connecting, can divide communities. And it reminds me a little bit of in the West Donlands, the debate we had about that front street east of Cherry to the park. You know, is that width of public realm there really appropriate? How does that, you know, does that tie the community together? Is it divide it? I don't feel that. In some ways, I feel that there's almost an and I appreciate everybody celebrating all of the public realm. I'm worried there isn't enough kind of built form here to kind of give this place a presence. It just doesn't. So I guess that's kind of where I'm going here. I'm not quite sure that I clearly see how the built form will evolve, and that there's a sufficient robustness, if you will, in the kind of range of built form that may emerge here. I also have to express, and I'm going to be the odd man out here, the Courtyard Commons idea. I love it in terms of nature, in terms of the way we manage water and think about biodiversity. I'm highly skeptical about everything being public, and especially in a place that's welcoming hundreds of thousands of people a year wandering through your neighborhood. That I just think that everybody goes everywhere doesn't work, especially in a place like this. So that to me is the core issue here. If I'm the developer, the depot is my anchor. What is the nature of that depot long term? What's the nature of Downsview Park long term? If they are both meant to be regional destinations, then how do I lever that reality and opportunity? How does that shape the residential development in the neighborhood? That part of it, I'm not convinced by yet, but it's a really interesting part of the city. You guys are lucky to be working on it, and look forward to seeing where it goes from here. Thank you.
I'm talking to myself. Paul, you're next.
Yeah, thank you. I think many people have said sort of versions of what I'd like to say, so I'll start by just saying that we really appreciate the ambition, and I'll say when this first got posted on the application center back last year, I immediately shared it with the team, and we all started nerding out on block sizes and dimensions, and that's kind of where my comments may focus, because I think the approach to how do I put this? This is the first thing in the last 25 years that has kind of exploded the city place convention that we've seen of 100 by 100 meter blocks, give or take, 25 meter by 25 meter towers with 25 meter tower separation, and you kind of figure it all out, and everybody's done an iteration or a version of that stretches 5 or 10 meters either way, and you end up with a real grid of streets. And I think what's interesting here is that you've blown it up. The blocks are much, much bigger. The buildings have that breathing space. The courtyard commons is the sort of green spine that stitches things together, and the approach of doing that sort of means you have fewer streets, fewer roads. The flip side of that is you have probably more pressure on those roads, because now they're 300 meters apart instead of 150 or whatever the metric is. And so I think that's sort of where my question about the numbers and the details really comes in, is how do we make sure that the sort of ambition of creating this sort of mixed use space and a kind of tying it back to the indigenous stories and a kind of regenerative approach and a reestablishment of nature doesn't fall apart when the EA is complete, and your right of ways get wider and the setbacks get bigger and everything just gets chewed up. And I think Joe talked a bit about barriers and things like that. I just want to make sure that we don't lose some of the good ambition that we're seeing here when we get to those details. And so things like a 30-meter roadway and the underpass there, the resolution of that under the tracks is going to be absolutely critical to making sure that the north-south connections work and that this other road doesn't become a barrier. I think Ralph talked about the servicing. There's a couple blocks that, A and B especially. I think A, you're probably looks like you're stuck with what the TTC's got there, and maybe we've got to find ways to push back on them, but it would be horrible to have a giant tarmac with a big suburban style loop-de-loop that's much more common in the Vaughan Metropolitan Center than in an urban condition be the forecourt of the station as you kind of exit north, notwithstanding you've got a beautiful park to the south. So my point really kind of comes to some of those things and diving in on the detail around how the servicing works. I have a little note here. I think block F seems to resolve it well. It seems like you've got 4 buildings serviced by 1 driveway. I don't know what the magic is there, if it's underground or if it's just maybe the way it was rendered, but more of that. And kind of as we work through the details, we'll ensure the success of this thing. Similarly, setbacks, I think the 25 meter you mentioned right of way for the main northwest street seems about right. But I think we really need to manage the setbacks, and then to Joe's and others' points, make sure that the built form frames it properly. You're going to have a lot of residual spaces just given the curving geometry and awkward things you're working around. So, we don't need a whole lot of setbacks to create those spaces. They'll be created for you every time you try to curve around a thing and resolve a 90-degree intersection. You're going to have lots of leftover triangles to do fun things with. So I think let's not overburden this thing with a whole lot of setbacks early. And then just to end on a very positive thing, I think the Muse, whatever it's called, up against the building seems very attractive to me. And what I kind of go back to, it's sort of when you go to a cathedral in your medieval city and you've got the beautiful front and the big plaza and it can hold, the Pope or the Rolling Stones. But then you go around the corner and there's always the side street where you're hitting the side wall and it's a blank wall that goes for 150 meters and it stinks of piss and the floor is asphalt. But the texture's there. And like, what is that version to the depot, right? Like, what do you do on the backside and how do you pair that with, it's impossible to recreate a medieval texture, but what is the texture of workshops? And we've seen it in the renderings, to the character that makes that sort of asymmetrical thing work. And, we don't have to kind of break down the massing everywhere and all the time. Sometimes a blank wall is a blank wall and let it be a blank wall. If we program it and pair it appropriately, and then it contrasts the other ends more. So I see a lot of potential in the Muse as a kind of way of maybe getting away from the kind of normative condition of a lot of standards where the transportation services folks and the EA is going to take this and kind of neuter the joy and the kind of fun that everybody's excited about. So find and savor and protect those moments as much as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Last but not least, Michael.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, hard to add very much to what my colleagues have said, other than I'm looking at the overall view on page 20 and reflecting on so many projects that we've seen at the panel and how comprehensive this vision is. Strong in so many ways, so many stories woven through. It's incredibly exciting to see an image of a neighborhood, not just individual projects, and I know we're at that early stage, of a neighborhood that includes, history, indigenous stories, includes access to significant national parks, and also includes the fine grain that we've been talking about for most of this session. So extraordinary, just extraordinary. If we jump ahead to page 40 or 38, which is the view of the depot, what's it called? Depot, the one that passes underneath the railway tracks. Very already in the early stages, acknowledging how challenging that connection is going to be for it to be successful for vehicles, bicycles, pedestrians under the bridge. And I wonder whether, and I look at the number of levels that need to be negotiated here, the level of the depot. It looks like there's a second level of sidewalk, which is going under the bridge. Would seem to me that being able to strongly express the connection of the levels of the depot, the pedestrian way, and the bridge that this view is being taken from, very important for success. Otherwise, there's a risk that this split of North Depot and South Depot becomes a dead end. And so you want to actively engage it with the bio trail, is that what we're calling it, running along the track. So that's something that I'm very interested in. I'm also, I think it was you, Dima, who mentioned, is there possible to extend and further blur the boundary between the cut edge and the public space here? And I know the 30-meter setback it, is already pretty wide. But just thinking about the columns at Piazza San Marco being freestanding edges of something that extends out into the landscape, wondering, is there some way for those column positions to be acknowledged in some way so that you blur that boundary? The going back to the overall rendering on drawing 20 in the package that I have, where it says introducing Downsview US. One of the things that is, I think, striking about the way that it's rendered is that it does look back to the development model of the railway lands. And some of the things that we're seeing more recently is that as soon as there's an opportunity, the question of how high can the podium be and still be called a podium is something we run into a lot. And I think we just saw a project a little while ago where 14 stories was called low rise, or maybe mid rise. Anyway, it was called something that we wouldn't expect in the context of this model. So being able to really succeed in this vision for a neighborhood in the way that the contrast between the towers and the street making devices permit natural light to penetrate well into these relatively narrow streets, I think is really important for success. Really, really important for success. And that discussions happen early and controls are put in early so that those podia, which are shaping the entirety of the public realm, have a chance to stay at the 5-6 story level and allow the penetration of light, access to view, all those things that this design beautifully shows. Thanks very much, Mr. Chair.
Great, thank you. We've gone a little bit long on our agenda, but I think that doesn't really matter. The most important thing here is the dream. I don't want to call it a dream. We'll call it a vision of what Downsview could become is so evocative. We've seen not too long ago, we saw the district, which name I can't remember, but it's a little bit further south. And I think it had it had a similar kind of challenge to it in terms of having a large footprint building. And I'm going to come back to that in a few minutes, because there were some conversations that we had there that can really read through to this as well. First of all, I've got a mess of scribbles here on multiple pieces of paper, and so what I'm going to be talking about is going to lack some structure, but let's give it a try. First of all, I heard from panel members a universal admiration for the vision that has been shown to us today. The presentation package itself, the luscious green spaces, the place making and place keeping from an Indigenous perspective woven throughout, and this promise of a very, very interesting neighborhood. I think that everybody really appreciates that. And one of the things I've noticed with the panel is when you see something like this, you inevitably go, and it's really good to do it. And that is, how do you keep this vision from being diluted and being broken down? We've seen it before. And it is something that when you see a project like this in this part of the city and the history that's gone into making it this far, you really want it to stick. So I'm just going to start with the dream to implementation. Several panel members talked about this, and that guidelines won't do. Requirements will need to be used here, and otherwise the only thing that we're going to remember of the dream are the images that we've just seen today, but the reality is something different, and that would be a shame. And I think several members have talked about that today. So that's one area that I think is really key in the conversation. I think too, and I'll sort of skip around here, there's been conversations between neighborhood versus destinations, and there's been many comments about this, about a place that becomes so popular that the people who come to visit it and use it overwhelm and conflict with the people who actually live there. And so there were several comments that came through about that. And what I got from that out of it is that, be very careful with the north-south, be very careful with where people are coming from outside the neighborhood that want to go and see something and how they get to the things and where those things are located, that you got to be really careful with that. And so my note on that respect talks about north-south, appears to be north-south pathways, and deciding in a way which ones are going to be the ones that people will more intuitively use to go to some of these events without destroying some of the north-south paths and east-west paths that you really want the neighborhood to enjoy without putting up locked gates around it. And I think that's a very important thing that came through. And with that, I think there was this notion of divisions between neighborhood and destinations, divisions between making sure that all the green spaces and the moves that are made to create the sort of bones of this space, that they don't inadvertently divide and separate parts of this neighborhood. The image that I'm looking at right now is the conceptual rendering of the road that cuts through the depot to make sure that it does not become inadvertently a divide, because I'm looking at the image. The ground floor of the depot is at one elevation with stairs. I see stairs that go down to another elevation and then eventually down to the road. For many people, they will see that as being a division. How do you connect those two together? And talking about the depot for a moment, which is one of the other items, I think there was a mix of reactions or comments about whether it should be connected or whether it shouldn't be. Is this east-west road going to do some damage or not? And I think from what I've heard with the panel members is that there should be some more thought put into it. There's not a lack of thought, but really stepping back and thinking again and just to make sure that this or a park that was mentioned, I think it was the North Park, that all of these moves do not inadvertently make it harder for this neighborhood to hold together, because this is our chance. This is our chance to do it right. One of the things that I picked up on as well, certainly lots of conversation about the green spaces. And one of the things that we have found, and it's oddly enough, when we're looking at shopping malls that are being transferred or reimagined as urbane mixed-use environments, and that is the shopping mall becomes the mysterious, block that's on the site plan. And when you were talking about the parks and the ones that go all the way through this neighborhood, think of the building as having parks inside of it as well. Spaces you may have to break through the roof to create those openings, those gathering spaces inside that building. A lot of people talked about the edges of the depot building, the permeability that is needed, that really appreciate what's been done so far, but that there's more to be done. And some of the sides of the depot are very animated and others are not. Questions came up about that as well, but not thinking of it as something that is separate, which you have clearly made great effort not to do, but that more of that needs to be done. So that's something to think about as well. The last thing I'm going to mention, just so that we can get out of here, is the notion of built form and heights. When we looked at the last district, I remembered clearly when we looked at the plan, and it's the one that's to the south of Downsview, south end of Downsview, there were building floor, the number of floors were identified for each and every building. And I remember people started talking on the panel about that, saying this is great because those heights go very well with the character that you're trying to develop in this, to envision in this development. Make sure that you don't lose those. And we haven't seen that in this presentation yet. It would be very interesting to see the team apply actual building heights, number of floors, because I think that goes right back to what people were talking about, and that is you've got the dream and then you got to implement it. And that sometimes is where the dream gets lost. And I think people have talked about that as well. And that's really important. This we don't see every day, which means it cannot end up like developments that we see every day. So those are some of them. There are more, but you're going to get comments in both ways. You're going to get a vote in a few minutes. You're going to get my summary as chair, and you're going to get even more information from the individual comments. But those are some of the highlights. So, Maria, if you could put the vote information up on the screen. And while Maria's doing that, I apologize for the ramble, but you're probably overwhelmed yourself with all the pieces of information that came through. This is such a good presentation. Okay, this is the first review, first time we've seen it. We can vote for support or non-support. Sometimes in voting for support, we apply condition, and it may be one or two. It's a case where there's a design that works really, really well, but there are some support, some conditions that they want to apply. And then there's non-support. So I'm going to ask the question to the panel members. Are there any conditions that you would want to apply to support? And I don't see anybody coming forward with them. So I'm going to call it. I'm going to bear with me here while I put together my list. Panel members, I'll call it your name. Tell me whether you're voting for support or non-support. Dima.
Support.
Jessica.
Support.
Thank you. Juhi is not here. I don't believe she's in the meeting. No. I'll move on to Heather.
Support.
Michael.
Support.
Jim Melvin.
Support.
Jim Goff. Jim? Is Jim Goff still there? No?
Yeah, he sent a message that he had to leave in the chat.
Okay. Okay, great. Joe. Is Joe there? Did Joe leave? Okay, I'll keep going. Ralph.
Support.
Okay. Olivia.
Support.
And Paul.
Support.
Maria, have I missed anybody? Anybody that's on the panel that's here?
Yeah, I think so. I think
Okay.
you just said all.
Okay.
So.
All right. Excellent. So voted. To the team, thank you very much. We really appreciate the time you've taken. To everybody else who's here, thank you for your patience. We've gone a little bit longer. It's been worth it. And we do look forward to this coming back again. And you will be receiving more information in terms of our comments. Thank you very much. Everybody, have a great evening.
Thank you, everyone.
Goodbye.
Bye.